everyone. Welcome. I'm on my own today. James Daniel here. Saturday, the 22nd of February. And everybody else is working or about their business. Taylor's probably off with the three youngins. So I don't want to lose steps. We're in a world that's on fire, whatsoever. And all of us have questions about where this is headed. And so I feel every opportunity to recognize it's neither here nor there. It's neither of the opposites. It's not in any of the things that are under discussion. And everybody wants to know, how is this going to work out? The Israelis want to know how it's going to work out. The Palestinians sure as hell want to know how it's worked out. The Ukrainians want to know. The Russians would like to know. Trump's saying one thing. Macron is saying another. The whole world is on fire. But it's neither of any of those opposites. This we know because we at the Love Foundry and those who are looking at love understand that love is the unification of opposites. That's what produces it in the material world. If we enter the world of love, the kingdom of love, as it's referred to, it's not some fantasy castle in the mind of a Christian culture. It's an actual kingdom filled with angelic beings and other beings and us as soul natures. It's a kingdom in which there are no opposites. They don't exist because the unification of opposites in that kingdom have produced the radiant presence of love itself. Now, that hasn't happened in the material world because it hasn't happened in the atoms of matter, and it hasn't happened in the lives yet of the mineral kingdom, the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and in our kingdom. Now, our kingdom should be radiant with love. We are equipped to be radiant with love. We're equipped to bear that fruit, but we haven't yet born it. We need to bring love down into and express it as a unification of opposites in ourselves. And by doing that in ourselves, it enters into the material world. That's how it gets there, because we're here and we are the ones equipped to do it. So I say do it. And empowering yourself with love implies, and this is why it's not always easy, even though we know how to do it and are willing to help you do it, help ourselves do it, which is what we're doing by helping you. Its challenge is those opposites in us. We don't know how to put them together so that they radiate love. We haven't worked all that out in here and in the heart. But we can. We're equipped to do it, and we've come to the place where there are a sufficient amount of people, I don't know what percentage in the human race right now that's on the earth, because remember, most of the human race, like most of the universe, is not in incarnation right now. It's somewhere else, either in that kingdom of love, which I think is where it all exists, or some other higher kingdom perhaps, or something we don't know about. But in this one, the material world, the human kingdom, it's not in charge. It's not an obvious and radiant condition of everything that we live in and around and with, but it will be, because great intelligences, great energies, great beings, great forces have decided to bring love down onto and into the material world, the human world. This is a great conversation going on in the universe that we don't see, but we are definitely participating in. And this sets up all of that conversation about what opposes love and pushes it back up and says, no, we're not ready for you yet. And love saying, yes, you are ready for you, because there's an agent of being down there with you that can bring love into it and bring us all into a harmony with each other and the thing, love itself. Now that agency is us. We can do that. But we weren't doing it too well. We've been growing towards it, by the way, forever. But while we've been growing towards consciousness that understands it, the Buddha who says this is what will bring it about, and the Christ who says this is what you need to do, and others who have conversations about it, there's been many civilizations, and each civilization has created a conversation of how to advance forward as a human race. In some of them, we developed mind. Some of them we developed ego. Some we developed personality. We have developed all the elements and aspects of human nature through all the civilizations we have lived through. But as we've gone forward, gaining ground as beings, changing our look, changing our expression, changing our culture, changing our civilizations, the world has been changing around us. It's been getting more crystallized. It's been getting more dense. It's been getting more material, because that's what happens. If you look around at nature, it tends to go from a watery swamp, a high moisture atmosphere, a very flexible and fluid physical structure, to something more and more and more and more dense and concrete. And humans seem to express that themselves. If we look at youth to old age, we realize we crystallize. We get more like beef jerky than fresh meat. And the flexible bones of children, which can take a fall, become the brittle bones of old people who shatter. This is a cycle, and the planet itself is part of that cycle. Maybe someday that will be overcome by love. I don't know. I can't see that far ahead. I can barely see to Wednesday. So that's a picture, a sort of snapshot, which you can agree with or not, but it has meaning. In this kingdom, we need love. Now, in this kingdom, us, the human place, we all live, we all have an emotional body. We have 3 bodies here. We don't see 2 of those bodies as objects, but we use all 3 for life. And we actually have 4, but the 4th isn't even proved by science, so we're not arguing about that. We're just going to point these out. You have the physical material body, which is the bones, and blood, and tissue, in gases that are the human nature. Solid, liquid, gas. That's in various stratas. But then also you have the emotional body, which, like the physical body, has different aspects. It's more solution-oriented, like Kool-Aid, but even in Kool-Aid, you've got water and sugar and color, all dispersed around in there. And if you leave it stand long enough, it will start to settle out by weight, by development, and weight accords to evolution. And so we get stratas in the emotional body if it is allowed to do that. If we tumble it all around, then it's like shaking up a snow globe. We also have, quite distinct from that body and distinct from the physical body, even though they all intermix, a mental body, which we're just kind of actually learning a lot about nowadays. We never paid any attention to a mental body. It didn't even exist in the mind or earlier versions of our human nature. Now it's a topic of conversation with everybody. You're out of your mind. Well, okay. I don't think that was a phrase earlier. There was a different phrase. I don't know what they were saying to each other, what we were saying to each other. But in our culture, it's a different phrase. So we're working on the mental body. and learning about it and plugging things into people's head like Elon Musk and checking it out and trying to control it and dominate things. But we don't see it specifically. We can see the result of its energies on a screen if we hook it up. We can read the emotional body on an e-meter down at the Scientology headquarters, but that doesn't show us the emotions. And the EKG doesn't show us the mental functions. And so, is it EKGs that do mine? Either way, you know what I mean. So the mental structure is invisible. So these are three bodies. But behind, within, and in a fourth dimension, manifesting all those bodies in some mysterious way unknown to humans and to science yet, is an etheric body. Now, this body contains, now I'm going away from science and I'm going into what would be more esoteric knowledge. So I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm just telling you what esoteric science says. And that doesn't even mean it's right. I try to find accurate sources of esoteric commentary, but that doesn't mean I'm that good at it. But within the etheric body, according to that, there are a number of energies, specific energies in various intensities and grades and potentials, not to mention the tubules, nadi they're called, or the chakras as they're called, which is all a chakra is, if you want to think about it, is a fourth dimensional place where various nadi, tubules in the etheric body, cross each other. But when they cross each other, they're not separate. They're like roundabouts where all the traffic merges and swirls around and then heads off down different pathways. But at those places, it has a chance to synthesize and integrate and merge together and invoke higher frequencies of energies in certain mysterious ways that relate to the heart chakra, the throat chakra, the ajna center, the crown chakra, the solar plexus chakra, the sacral chakra, and the root chakra. And then there are minor chakras in the lungs and the elbows and hands and knees and various places in the body. And where every one of those group chakras, group nadi chakras appear, the seven major ones, there will be a glandular system formed in matter as a response, atomic response of atoms attracted to and coordinating with according to what's going on in that chakra energetically and in those energies that are in the tubules or nadi of those chakras. So this is how the esoteric world considers manifestation in the material world. The material world doesn't respond to love directly, easily, like just whoosh. But it does respond. So what happens? It forms a glandular system. The thyroid is a good example, which in turn produces hormones and other elements in the blood. So there's an interactive system here. But because the etheric energies circulating through are energies from the kingdom of love, circulating through this kingdom, they don't transfer love over into the material body, the conscious body of a human being. It doesn't mean there's no magnetic bleed over or whatever we want to call it, but it means that you don't have the free access to love. Now, what restricts it? Well, matter itself is not intelligent enough to respond. That's one thing that restricts it. You, me, we are intelligent enough to respond to love, to invite it across that barrier and release it into ourselves, release it into our emotional body, release it into our mind. In the Buddhist conversation, it's how to take mind to love, how to release that in your mind. And then you become one with it. In the Christian process, in the spiritualizing of the heart, which isn't exclusively Christian. It was being done on the planet by other groups and religions and sort of fellowships before Jesus was born. And so we have different streams of love that kind of come together in Christianity in a certain way. For example, Christmas, Father Christmas, comes from a source older, maybe not older, but not the same source as the birth of Jesus. We kind of just put the two together. They agreed to it. That came from a sort of Nordic pathway of responding to when the sun moves northward, when the point of the winter, where there's the darkest time of the year, and spirit and love and renewal have left the world seemingly, and it's cold and frozen and everything's hopeless and dark, then something happens. We keep going. And as we go back towards the sun moving northward, life and love and an energy and possibility are reborn in the human heart, in the human spirit, and in the trees and lives around us. So we begin to recognize that darkest point as a place to invoke life, to invoke love, to look for the renewing in the following year. And there was no guarantee it was going to be an early spring. So we naturally form a consistency of application towards it. Well, we look at it materialistically. It's going to happen anyway. We're going to go around the sun. Everything's going to come back. You see, that's a material perspective that we have dried up into as we became a raisin from the grape that the earth probably once was. But there's more to it than that. There is life itself returning. What is that mysterious thing that drives the tree to create out of the bark of itself, just right out of the bark, dry and hard, boom, here comes a little bud, pops right out of it. And then a little branch comes out and a little green shoot comes off of that, and pretty soon you got a flower and some bee fooling with it, and after a while, through a process of sex, you've got a fruit. Well, that's a pretty miraculous thing. And it's not just the earth orbiting the sun. It's a chemistry, the chemistry of the universe, being suffused and charged with the chemistry of life. And somewhere in that chemistry of life is intelligent love. Now, we can't take a picture of it, unless you call Carillion photography a picture of it. We can't really take a picture of it and put it on the wall. We can draw a picture of it from something we see in our heart, something in our intuitive soul, which can be really beautiful. But snapshot, harder to do. Probably someday we will be able to. So the point we're making here is that in the world, the emotional body is part of the material world. The mental body is part of the material world. Emotional matter is the same, indirectly the same, as dense matter or mental matter. Lower mental matter, because the mental levels go up and up and up and out of the material picture, in a way that it does not have that dynamic relationship to love. And that classified it as matter. Now, to take an atom of emotional matter, whatever that looks like, I don't know. It will someday be, but I don't even know if an atom of dense matter is what that looks like. We just take pictures of it and draw pictures of it and decide, oh, that's what it looks like, a nucleus with a proton and neutrons and electrons spinning around it in little orbits. Well, that may end up being what we decide it looks like, and then we may end up deciding it looks like something else, and that was just our current picture of it. We never even had that picture of it until recently, so to speak. So we're assuming for conversational sake here that the emotional body and its feelings, particularly the feeling of fear, we're talking about fear versus love in the emotional body, that fear in the emotional body exists because of one single thing. We lack the power of love in the emotional atoms, in the emotional body, in our ability to wield it. Now, we use emotional will, or will in the emotional body, to take mental ideas and turn them into actions. If it's Tesla, you turn it into an electric motor and you revolutionize the world. So he takes an idea, which exists in the idea universe, turns it into a mental blueprint, supplies it with emotional desire, builds it into a motor and a generator. Look at the wisdom of this. He takes both sides of the problem. I can build an electric motor, that's great, but there's no electricity to turn it with. So first I have to build a generator and then generate electricity from some mechanical force, like a water wheel or something else, steam engine. And then I can take that electricity, transfer it to the motor over some wires. And in his case, he decided I could just plug it into the earth at a certain point if I got the frequencies right, which is why the Tesla coil is so amazing. But we could do that. And we could separate the generator from the motor by miles and miles. And now with electric cars, we put a battery in the middle and we charge it up over here and then we take it over there and it drives the motors. Except he had to invent both. So in his practical inventing mind, he made them both the same. In other words, put electricity into a generator and out from the other end of it in the wires comes electricity. Spin this enough with these coils of wires and magnets and things, and out will come electricity. Take the same generator and go over here and turn it around and put that electricity into it backwards, and it will drive that generator and make it a motor, electric motor. Wow. Because he had to pull electricity down and out of an invisible place through mechanical activity and then use it. So you see this getting into these next higher dimensions where all this energy is available from where? Where's all that electricity coming from in the universe? It's not all just static electricity from universes turning. It comes from somewhere. And it can be converted under the laws of the conversion of energy into another force, a force of electricity instead of the energy, the creative energy of love up here. Now, what do we do in ourselves to create the same process? We don't have a little generator in the emotional body, which we can spin, and it'll generate love out where we put emotional energy in. That would be great. But wait a minute. Maybe we do. Maybe we can. Maybe through a certain process and a certain posture, which is all an electric motor is. It's a process and a posture in relationship to higher energies that upon its rotation, upon its action, love or electricity in three phases, three types, which is Ohm's law, E equals I over R. Energy equals amplitude over resistance. This is an output. But when we look at ourselves and go, where's my motor? And you go, well, you have to use what you've got. You've got to use your mind to build a little blueprint here of what you're going to have it to do, just like Tesla did. Tesla made the remark, in all my inventions, and you would be amazed, he had 200 patents or something. In all my inventions, I never put pencil to paper until it was completely worked out in my mind, down to the last switch, down to the last detail. And every one of them worked the first time. So, and now they've all been improved upon, and that's great because materials that he was building them out of 100 years ago weren't really very good. So So as we think about all of this, we realize, well, maybe we can employ our mind and we can build in our emotional body and our mental body and in our physical world a way in which we can generate love into the emotional body by converting emotional power into something in ourselves that creates love. So I'm not telling you how to do that. That's a different podcast, because this is just to inspire you to realize that we can do that. And I'm not going to ask you to send $25 for your God-anointed tablecloth, or to pay us to send you the blueprints, or to do some silly thing that people like to do to profit themselves. We're happy to tell you how to do it. It's just something you have to stop and focus on to apply it to yourself. It takes a bit of focus. It takes a bit of commitment. It takes a bit of visualization. It takes some imagination, and it takes some acting on the whole idea as if it were going to work. And we will go through the steps. We'll take you through the steps. And in a workshop, you build your own motor. You build your own device. You are the device. A human being is a love machine. Everybody wants to be a love machine. You are one. So let's put it to work. But before you do that, you have to realize you're missing love as a usable power in you. And your fear in the emotional body is a gift of nature to tell you that. It tells you, I can't create my way out of this mess. Because love, which is the creative power of the universe, in any way, in the material world, that something is created, love is engaged. When love comes back after the darkest point of the winter, when it gets stretched really thin, it comes from somewhere. It comes as a gift back to the earth every single spring. And inside us is a way in which we can renew ourselves with that love. The same way we can have an ever-renewing spring of love flowing into us in our emotional body. But that won't be an emotion. The emotion that you will have in response to it will be joy, will be ecstasy, will be, oh my God, this is better than I thought. That you will have that response to it until you no longer have any response to it, because you're so used to it that it's just you. And then you'll be the source of ecstasy and joy. I don't know what that feels like, but probably much better even. But it itself will be there. That's the point. And it's not there now. And because it's not there now in the emotional, it might be intermittently there, by the way. We have moments where we spike up and fall into resonance with love. And then something can happen and change, miraculous transformation or transmutation. In the old days, transmutation could happen in front of people. Water was turned into wine because the power of love was fresh and new and released into the environment through the person of Jesus. At the request of his mom, she kind of goaded him into it. But he could do it because love was there to do it. Jesus had no training in turning water into wine. He was certainly a sincerely devout man, spiritually speaking. But they weren't teaching that in the church, which is why he got in trouble with the church, because they can't do it themselves. So they don't want some rogue agent running around doing it. That's going to take away their thunder. So that's not happening today so much. But love hasn't lost the ability. We did. Well, we never really had the gift of it sufficiently to be doing that, or there'd be more historical records of people turning water into wine. Perhaps in the future we won't be so limited. But the fact that a human being could carry this immense potential inside of him and actually employ it on behalf of something as mundane as a wedding, a human wedding, which is a very spiritual thing, which we forget about. We think, oh my God, turning water into wine, that'll be great. I could just have a beach party. We forget that the event is relevant. The event is the union of man and woman in a spiritual way for the production of the future of the human race in a very sacred ceremony. So these have to fall into the category with us. You have to remember the context of what's going on at any given moment, including all the miracles of Jesus and the healing of all these people. These are all in a context. And when we understand the context in relationship to love itself and what's important in the universe, where love is the supreme creative power and intelligence, then it all makes a lot more sense. But in the individual human life, we don't have all of that lofty thinking. But that doesn't mean we can't employ love. The bride and groom didn't have that lofty thinking when they ran out of wine. And he didn't make just a bottle. He made like 49 gallons or something. I don't know, these two giant jars they brought up, stone jars they brought, held like 25 gallons apiece or something like that. I don't know. You can look it up. Anyway, the bride and grooms today are just like the bride and grooms then. We don't have any ability to say, hey, we're out of wine, let's drum up some. We don't have that ability. So, and I don't think Jesus did. Love did. And love shared it made the wine not for him, not for his mom. It made the wine for the wedding people. So what it tells us is that, given the fact that you may or may not agree that miracle happened, I don't mind that it happened, because I certainly am convinced that love has no limitations when it comes to something as silly as water into wine. Turning a wicked man to good, that might take a little more alchemy. But water into wine, hell, that's easy. So, but yet science can't come near it. It's not Kool-Aid. You don't just throw a bunch of ingredients together and mix it up. Even if you powder wine and add water back, it's not going to be the same thing. So what we're saying is this: your emotional feeling body can't employ love. So when something approaches us that has a distinct possibility of harming us from memory, if you see some pretty little thing coming towards you as a puffy little thing, and then you go, oh, what a pretty little, and it eats you alive, then other people watching that are going to watch out for those puffy little things that look so pretty, they just eat you alive. So the emotional body has memory. We have memory. Memory comes to us through it, and we can look at things and realize that a 25-foot alligator has the potential to eat you. And so do 200 or 300-pound tigers and various other critters. And that little snake that doesn't seem very long has a poison that will cause you to drop dead in no time. And I know the fear of those things. When I was in the Vietnam War, so when you're hiking through the bushes, they had spiders. I don't know how venomous they were, but they had spiders. But you don't want to find out. They had spiders so big that their legs could hang over the top of a 2-pound coffee can. Terrifying looking things. And if you're going through the jungle and you come up against a spider web at night, you can't just turn on your flashlight. You're hiking through a jungle in a dangerous environment where people are out looking for you to kill you, or you're looking for them. And when you hit up against one of these webs, if you're in the front, this is one of the disadvantages of being the lead guy in a platoon or something. You come up against a spider web, and it's so strong because the thing that built it could arm wrestle you. It's so strong that you can feel the branches bend that it's hooked to before it gives away. And I promise you, any single individual that ever ran into one of these and had to push on through it silently, the other guys behind you not going to have the problem. All you think about for that split second is where the hell is the spider? And if he's hanging in the middle of the web, which is where you think he's probably hanging, which they don't usually do, fortunately. They usually hang over there on the side, and when some idiot gets caught in the web, then they come scuttling out to deal with it, because spiders aren't stupid. They realize that some of the shit that gets into your web could hurt you, in which case they can just hang out there and leave it alone. Like, oh, I can always build another web. But you can't think that way when you hit one of those things. All you're thinking of is he's in the middle of his web, and that means that he's now on me. And we can't be pounding all over ourselves in the middle of creeping through the... It's just one of those tiny situations that will probably never result in a spider crawling up your neck, but you can't imagine that it isn't possible, because you know it's possible. So this is based on seeing the spider during the day, recognizing how big they are, and not being sure. Nobody can tell, oh, those spiders are harmless. Yeah, my ass, they're harmless. They didn't get that big eating nothing. So, and we were Americans in somebody else's jungle, so we don't know. And they did have things like the 3-step snake. They call it the 3-step because when it drops out of the bushes and bites you, you take 3 more steps before you're going to seize up, crash, and 99% not be alive, because you can't get any person out of there. I mean, people can die in 4 hours from malaria because you can't get them to some place where you can treat them. And so a 3-step snake is even more deadly. So forget the enemy. You got this stuff to think about. And emotional fear is your friend. You don't like it, and it crawls up all over you and sets you on fire, and your hair goes out, and your arm stands up, and your blood pressure goes through the ceiling. Your adrenal glands kick in all the adrenaline into your body that you've got, and now you're vibrating like an E string. So, but it's there for your use, to show you, I don't have anything to give you, man. I can't help you here. You better come up with something better than love, because love is not here for you. You can't, if you could summon love, it's a great creative power. Love is an antidote for anything. Fear or the venom attached to it. Love could transform it. If it can transform water into wine, it can transform venom into blood. You know that if you have faith as a Christian, you know that love can do that. But you also know, as a Christian, I can't really call myself a Christian because I don't belong to anybody's church, but I certainly subscribe to love. But you know, as a Christian, that most of us as Christians in the world don't have that power in our emotional body, so we get scared just like anybody else. And so when we think about things like this and look at them going on around us, we find this emotional fear. Emotional fear is the reminder that you are missing the power of love in your emotional body. So the logical question is, how do I put it there? Because I want that stuff. And if you knew you could have it, and have it rather simply, in my view, look, the actions are simple. The doing of it is a real challenge because of our resistance inside of us to actually employing ourselves in a way that produces the opening of the door to love. It's one of those things. Simple to imagine, hard to do. So, but what starts with imagining it, It starts with taking the few elements that it takes to produce the condition where it can happen and adopting that posture in relationship to love where it can then flow through you and into your emotional body. 5 things. You can do 5 things. There's little sub things to each of those 5 things, I'll admit it. But 5 things and you're on your way. On your way. So, and for some, it won't be a very long journey. Now, I've been working at this a long time, and I'm really still not very good at it. Some things show me that love is at least noticing my effort, because I still have managed to make it through every one of those months in which I had no idea how. And I think some of you have probably had that experience too, where you think, this is it. This is the final thing. I might as well pull the handle and flush myself down, because I'm just going around in the bowl and nothing's going to happen. That's it. Everything's going to hell. Your car's running on E. They're going to turn off the lights, turn off the water, yada, yada, yada. We've all been at that 11th hour. And then, some shit happens. Just amazing what can happen. And big and little. So, and then we go, and we go back to the start, but we're starting over. Oh, our clock resets. It's now the 1st of the month. Don't have to worry about it until the 22nd. That's when I would start to panic. Around the 22nd or 23rd, if on commission life, because I had no, if you kill my entire family, I would have to borrow money to bury them. So I didn't have a backup. And credit was not a thing. So this is where we all stand on the ladder of life. Now, if you're inherited billions, and some have, you don't have that same problem. You have a different love. That because you inherited billions does not mean that you inherited love. You already had that. Your parents had it. The egg in your mother has it. The sperm in your father has it. When you put the two together and produce a human being, you have it. But can you activate it? Because it takes your free will to activate it. You're the key. You have to be plugged in. You have to decide with your free will, I'm turning this sucker on. I'm Tesla and I'm firing this thing up. I'm producing the generator to make it pull love out of the love kingdom and into the human kingdom. And I'm going to power the motor with it by taking action. That's up to us, each of us individually. Now, I'm quite certain there are those that are born with it active in them. And I think babies are protected by love in ways that are just amazing. Just amazing. And so it's an odd balance of all those things. But adults who become mature and self-consciously aware that they have an I am love. So I want that in me. I want it active. I want that. Check it off. I've got a mind. I want that. Check it off. I have emotions. I want my emotions to be powerful with love. I want to check that off. So you see, these are things that we have to give ourselves. Nature will give us a lot of that. It'll give you a very good physical form, but some people not so much. I had a friend who he and his sister both caught polio when they were young, really young, and they were told by their doctor they will never walk again because polio was a scourge. He was older than me, so it probably happened in the 50s, like 1950. I forget when the Salk vaccine occurred, but it wasn't a thing then. So he's looking at a lifetime, and, Roosevelt had polio. That's why he was in a wheelchair. So it was a terrible thing. But he said he and his sister got together and said, that's not going to happen. And doctors weren't any help because they're like, yeah, that's it. Sorry, kids, we'll get some braces for you and we'll give you exercises and we'll try to ameliorate the problem a little bit, but you're paralyzed, all right, pretty much. You're going to just struggle along. And he, how did it go? Oh, he at the time I saw him last when he was in his probably 50s and I was maybe 20 or something, he still held world records in swimming. And his sister was an international ice skater. So however they became connected to that power through their will and their effort and their energy. Now, we can't give the credit of that to love. Well, we don't want to. We'll give it to their spirit, their tenacity, their commitment. But the commitment to the inner power in them to draw it out and overcome shrunken tissue and weakened nerves and the inability to summon up a coordination in the body has to be given to something greater than simply animal human nature. They had to release that into themselves, and they had to go through a certain regimen, which for them was an enormous amount of work. They just came together, and out of the love of a brother for a sister and a sister for a brother, they just supported each other until it demonstrated the magnificence of it. Now, it would be easier if we just said, love, fix this. But the human nature has to grow up in maturity before those kinds of commands are available to us towards ourselves. And there's a big barrier to that because, and I think a big part of that barrier is the church itself of the Christians, which was the experience that showed us that love was available, present, and willing. And that is that Jesus didn't fix himself. You see in front of all of these churches, this sorrowful person hanging there on the cross, being murdered by the locals with the help of the Romans, the ever-obliging Romans. So we subscribe that to weakness, as if he were powerless, as if he couldn't do anything about it. But that's not the case with love, is it? Love can do anything it wants. What we do know happened is he turned himself over to love and said, if the destiny of mankind, the destiny of this world necessitates this demonstration of my loyalty to love, I will do it. I will not. He took it upon himself. He took love upon himself. And when we do that, it has no enmity. And then when the world turned against him, they didn't dislike him. They chose Barabbas over him, who was a thief, but they didn't really nobody was complaining about Jesus being a jerk. It was just a question of rejecting the ideas of love in a human being instead of out there in God or somebody that would come and do things and not do things because they were told to do that. They didn't react to it organically. They just reacted to it by direction. And even Pontius Pilate, who wasn't an idiot, said, I don't see anything wrong with this guy. I don't have any desire to kill him. But the church fathers said, yes, we have to. And your deal with us, your contract with us as governor of this area is that you do what we require spiritually. And we require this spiritually because he's a threat to our spiritual stuff. Kind of things that we still do to this day, one way or another, towards things that we don't trust, especially if there's something new. And really, especially if they're taking away our power and our authority and our source of money. We don't want that. Just don't want it. So that happened. Now, in our world, here we are, 2,000 years later, and you have the ability to bring something new to the game. You have the ability to decide that that's in you. Still there. It hadn't gone anywhere. It's gotten stronger, if anything else. It went underground, so to speak, and through resurrection became the property of every human being forever. It's in the seed. It's available, not just available as a thing in nature that would keep animals going, keep atoms spinning. It's available to a self-conscious aware being to join as a self-conscious aware relationship. That's because that's what we are. We're self-conscious and aware. We have an I. So our I can join with the I of love, which is instead of our personality, we can actually join the personality of love, the cosmic personality of love, and share it with our I if we want to. We don't have to. But with that comes the power of it. And that's the separation between the ego or the human personality that has not made that connection through agreement with it by using your free will, and those that have. And so few have at this stage of the game that we don't have enough to hold a quorum to get enough people together to start having a big impact on the human race. But that's about to change. Because as human beings are growing up, and we grow up, we have we're like popcorn. We've been coming to the temperature at which kernels start to pop. And around the world, here and there are people that are popping. And we see them doing strange, miraculous things. And we photograph it and we put it on YouTube and we suddenly go, oh my God, look at that TikTok person. Look at that Instagram person. But something's breaking through. They went from nothing to 1 million views overnight. It's an incredible, positive, potential system for revealing love. Love in a human being, in an emotional body, in a mental body, in a physical body. And we see miraculous results. And it can come in the form of, and I think next up will be healing. I think healing through love will be a next miraculous thing we're going to start seeing show up on the internet. And it's going to be because people decide, hell yes, it is in me. And if I do these things, and if I invoke it and invite it and commit to it and put myself in the right posture, that's going to pop through into my world, into the material life. I don't know what's going on the soul life. It's up there hoping I'll do it, maybe, or maybe you're not even paying attention. I don't know. But I think if I do it here in the world, with or without any religious training, Jesus had no religious training in this subject because it hadn't happened yet until it happened to him, which might have been as big a surprise to him as it was to John, who is baptizing him, but he didn't really expect it to turn into something quite that big or to get him beheaded, but it did. So let's find out. Let's find out. Find out by focusing in on this subject, this idea. You have enough time left. I may not. I'm getting to be old, but I'm working on it. Focus in, because it's not some mysterious blessing on you by some God that is invisible to make it happen. We have all the tools and equipment in ourselves to break through and put this remarkable living presence in our emotional body with its powers. And we also have enough sense in our mind to know what keeps it there by supporting its necessities of living. Love has necessities of living in our bodies. And that means not hating. If you hate, you push it out. If you have envy, jealousy, greed, these 7 deadly sins, then you're telling love to go away by the reciprocal reaction. But when with love, you have the creative power of transformation, transmutation, and grace. You don't need that other shit. You don't need to be jealous. because someone may not love you. You have the power to love them, the actual power to deliver love to a tree stump, and it might bloom. Sometimes they do. Certainly, someone who is fully infused with love can make it bloom. It's one of the recorded semi-miracles that certain kind of spiritual beings have been recorded to have done, to take a staff and cause it to sprout by just holding it. Well, they don't make it sprout. Love does. Now, it's an old magician's trick, maybe. Moses was credited with having his staff turn into a snake. Now, that's, I'm sure that David Copperfield could do that. At least make it look like he did. On America's Got Talent or England's Got Talent or something like that. But set all that aside and get down to what's real. What's real is what's in you. And if something's in you waiting for you to invite it out into the play of life, into paying your bills like I went through every month, or to healing some part of yourself which needs it, or to building bridges between you and some other part of life, so that the opposites of Russians and Ukrainians, Palestinians and Israelis can come together in the union of love and recognize that we are one. And what happens to you happens to me. So what is it you actually need, aside from being pissed off at me for something I may or may not have done? What do you need to show that we are one and that we can live together and share together and grow together and have our children, instead of being pounded to death, raised with beauty? That's what the power in the emotional body is when we substitute emotion for love. Now, how do you do that? Check in. I'll tell you. I'll show you. Well, I'll show you as best as I know myself. But you have to do it. But once you know you can't be stopped. Your inner self won't let you stop. It'll haunt you. At first, once you recognize, yes, I could do that, but it's a lot of work. I don't want to bother to put the effort to it. Even though you don't know, in your case or anyone's case, how much work it will take. Sometimes someone just pushes against a boulder and it just rolls down the hill. Sometimes you've got to really do a lot of shoving to get it moving. And we've all built the boulders that close off our cave. And we got to do a lot of resurrecting in ourselves of love and courage and faith and union with supreme energies and ideas. Somehow we've got to get past all of this self-doubt. I can't do it. No human beings ever. And there are people walking the planet, I will promise you, I testify to this, who are long past this conversation we're having. They have accomplished it. They are demonstrating it, and they're working constantly from their place on the planet or in the inner worlds to help humanity discover this in themselves. They're not interested in rushing out in front of people and showing them how to turn water into wine. They're interested in strengthening that in us, which tells us we can make that connection and do it ourselves. And that takes a strange form of teaching without being in front of you, teaching from within you. Every little opportunity to strengthen someone's faith is done invisibly by the great teachers. You might be sitting on the bank trying to figure out how to catch a fish, and someone might sit down next to you and say, "What's wrong?" And you go, "Well, I don't have anything to eat at home, and I need a fish, and I can't catch the bastards. They're slippery and they're fast." And someone might say, "Well, let me give you a couple of ways in which it might happen." And so they show you, and you get excited because it works. And now you got dinner for your family. And that person just goes away. They didn't ask you to give them half of the fish you caught. They didn't need you to do that. They can catch their own fish. They might share a fish dinner with you, but that's it. And there's nothing more to say to you. You received what you needed from them, how to catch a fish. Now you're feeding yourself. Now you're going forward, because no one can take the whole world in 1 second unless they have already conquered the world in themselves. So catching fish is just one lesson in self-empowerment. And that has to be transferred and translated to your ability to imagine, to think, to act on your thought and feeling, to turn that effort into something that works. And then pretty soon you've got a fish. Well, someone came along and gave you a shortcut because they said, here, sharpen this stick, make a fishing pole, get some string and a hook. Do it this way. And if you look around the world on the internet, you'll see all these different ways people catch fish. We've gotten so good at it that now we're stripping the oceans of all the fish because we have no sense of husbandry or caretakering of a world in which there's so many of us being irresponsible that it can break the back, even of nature, of a world. So these are things we have to learn now, right now, not later, right now. And all this talk about carbon is really a talk about responsibility. So when it turns out, and if it turns out, that carbon has no relationship to global warming or anything like that, it certainly does have a relationship to global greening by giving more animals and plants life, particularly plants, but the animals come with the plants, then that'll be great, but it won't matter because the lesson of responsibility towards the environment might translate into not killing all the fish. It might translate to maybe we could eat a little bit of fish and a lot more turnips. Either way, if we grow up with love, it will all come naturally. So take a look at your emotional body and realize that fear of something is a place where you would love to have the power of love, but don't think you do. You might have it. You may not have what you may not know how to employ it, but it's there already. It's already there in the invisible universe. Love is everywhere. You don't have to go seeking it. You don't have to go to the top of the mountain to get it. It's at the bottom of the well as well. It's everywhere. What you have to do is know how to summon it to the surface of your emotional body and put it to work by taking action on it. And then it reveals itself through the action. So that's all a part of what we're going to do. The simple 4 or 5 things. Get control of your fear. Get control of your ego. That's one of the things we have to do. Commit yourself to a relationship to love. Identify it within you, which is a process. And once you see love and the radiant purity of that energy pouring out of the dimension in which it lives into your conscious sense of it, your question of does it exist or not sort of fades away. You don't know how to employ it yet, but it's like, wow, look at that. That's right. It's right there. So summon that to your inner senses. Commit yourself to it becoming a coexistence in your human individuality. Eliminate your fear of what you may lose by having too much love in you. Not going to happen because your free will is a governor. They have a governor on a diesel engine. It spins and little weights go up. And when the weights get up to a certain height, because it's spinning that fast, they start to shut off the flow of the diesel to the engine because diesel engines require no electricity to run. They just need fuel once they get going, and they can keep going as long as the fuel keeps going. So that little fly ball, as they say, the governor floats up. And then it shuts down the fuel when it gets to the point where it starts to create too much stress on the engine because it's going too fast. So creating that flyball governor on a diesel engine by Mr. Diesel, we have stuff in us like that. It tells us that governing an engine, once you invented it, is as important as inventing it. You have to tell it when to shut off, or it'll just keep going faster and faster and faster, particularly if it runs out of fuel. I lived in a logging camp, and this could happen to a diesel tractor, a big bladed D8 Cat or something. If they run out of fuel, the fumes coming in can have a runaway effect on a diesel engine. And without a governor to control how that goes, they can accelerate until they explode or something breaks. Now, they always have an emergency on those equipment, and if you pull that lever, it opens the gate and it takes the pressure out of the cylinder so it can't push the pistons up and down. That's one way you immediately cut off the power. But a flyball governor is another way. So by imagining these things in an engine, we realize we have those in ourselves. You can push back. You can release the tension. You can govern the power. We just need to employ that in the intricacies of psychology while we carry forward. We can let off steam, but we also can know when it's time to just build it up. So our inner relationship with love will go through an entire cycle for the human race once we learn that this is all true and that we can employ it in ourselves, and that we start about the business of doing it, and we see people having all these experiences with love. Then we will all talk about it, we'll work on it, we'll start developing systems of modulating it, systems of managing it, systems of turning it on and turning it off because we don't want to run away with it in ourselves or in our children or in anyone else. So all of this is part of the future of the human race, but it starts now by letting it in to the emotional nature and eliminating the fear, because as love enters, fear disappears. Thank you, everyone, for taking a little bit of time on the 22nd of February, which is the darkest part of the year, basically. Well, not the darkest, because the sun has already started moving northward, but in the coldest depth of winter, things can get real tough. This is the month of life and death. But what following this is going to come spring. And with spring, the strength of love rising up in us. And at a certain point, it's going to burst forth in the human race, just as it does in the trees. It might take 6 years before an avocado tree will bear an avocado, or a walnut tree. A walnut. But at some point, boom, out come the blossoms. Here come the bees. And then comes the fruit. And that's the fruit of the human race, is love, creative power, and a free mind, and a free will to apply that creative power to the loving environment that we're in. And when love is fully infused with intelligence and will, to the point where we will not violate love's laws or principles of loving, then freedom can be placed into the hands of humanity in a way that we have never conceived. But like giving loaded guns to kids, you don't do it. You just don't do it until it's impossible for them to hurt themselves with it, at least as close to impossible as we can get. Thanks. See you next time. Drop me a note, drop us a line, check us out. We have Patreon, we have these different things. If you want to support love entering into the world, check us out. Find out how we can help you with a workshop go about producing it in yourself. And if that makes sense to you and seems to work with you, then support it for others in the world, because this is the most important step humanity will ever take in our view. Thank you.